spiritual, and mental well-being. Just imagine you on 88.5 Soufriere FM talking, questioning, sharing your experience, information, education, entertainment, news, instructions, advice on diabetes, high blood pressure, strokes, menopause, AIDS, pregnancy, sex.
Sex? Did you say sex?
As prescribed, take your medication, exercise, and diet. On 88.5 Soufriere FM, tell a friend, call your neighbor. Casualty 911 is on.
Of course, we have 18 minutes after the hour of 10 a.m. This is where we say good morning, good morning. Welcome inside a Casualty 911. Hey, this morning here with me is Fawn. Folks, pardon me, I'm not 100% this morning, so I just want to apologize in advance, okay? Hey, Fawn, good morning. Welcome inside another edition. And of course, Fawn is here with a guest as well, all right? Morning, Fawn.
Good morning, Ulan. Thank you so much for coming in this morning. I know that you're not feeling so well, so I appreciate the effort and your commitment to our show. Thank you to Romanus. I say it in advance. Thank you to Romanus in the event that we don't get to say so at the end of the show. Good morning to all of our listeners, our new listeners, our regular listeners. We appreciate all of you. And today, because we are starting a little late, I'm going to jump right into our topic for the day. Our special guest joining us today is Miss Fadia Andrew, who works with the Department of Human Services. I think she probably has a few technical issues at the moment, so we will wait for her to rejoin us. Our topic for today is intimate partner violence. So we will be delving into that issue. It is an issue that affects many people around the world and in St. Lucia. It is something that sometimes we take very lightly, we make fun of it. And I hope that by listening to our discussion today, we will really get to understand what it is, the consequences to those who go through it personally, and what it does to us as a society. So, welcome to Miss Fadia Andrew. She's not new to our program, but I would like you to give a short introduction. Tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into our topic this morning.
Good morning, listeners. Good morning, Soufriere FM. As always, it is a pleasure to be on. Personally, I would have preferred to be in studio with everybody else, but I was kept out of Soufriere this morning. I'm joking, of course. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Fadia Andrew. I am currently employed with the Division of Human Services, where I've been um, doing extensive work in the area of child protection and work with older persons as well as with families. So I've worked the entire spectrum. Um, Prior to that, I would have worked as a school counselor, and there too, I would have had a myriad of experiences. I also worked as a teacher and as in the banking sector. So you can say that Miss Andrew has been around and has quite a bit of experiences under her belt. Thank you.
Indeed. So, without further ado, as I already mentioned to our listeners that we would be speaking about intimate partner violence. So, I would really appreciate if you would give us not so much a definition, but maybe an explanation of what it is and other various types of abuse and so on. Or you can start it off as you like, actually.
Well, intimate partner violence is an issue of growing concern, Ms. Menville. It is of growing, it has been a huge social ill, and it continues to rear its ugly head in our homes, in our communities, in our schools, in our wider societies. And, one of the things that I want to say, first of all, when we speak about intimate partner violence, there are a few areas I want to touch on. First of all, intimate partner violence doesn't mean that you're still in a relationship with the person. So that's one of the key issues that I want to highlight. It does not necessarily mean that you are still in an active relationship. So some of the cases we have seen and we know of, the persons have moved on. They are no longer in a relationship. They are no longer intimate, but that level of violence continues. It is also possible to have intimate partner violence between school children. And that's another issue that I want to highlight. Just because your child is 16 or 17, if you are seeing signs, don't discount it. Don't say it cannot happen or these children are too young. Children also sometimes find themselves embedded in those uncomfortable situations that are abusive, that are destructive, and that can cause them long term harm. Another area that I want to raise is the area of um, heterosexual as opposed to same sex relationship, partner violence within that context. Very often, when we think about intimate partner violence, we think that it only happens between heterosexual couples. And when I say heterosexual, I mean men and women involved with each other. But I want to put it out there, listeners, that intimate partner violence can happen as well between same sex couples. We're talking about um, girls who are involved with girls or ladies who are involved with ladies, as well as boys and men who are involved with the same sex. Men on men, boys on boys, the intimate sex partner violence can happen in that context as well, right? Um, as we look a little more deeply at it, I just want to indicate to you that it is not, it is usually not just physical. Again, you know, I'm sorry, Miss Manville, are you speaking?
No, I haven't said anything, but I am very happy that you brought up the fact that you started with the physical because it tends to be the one that we are most aware of and the one that most people would tend to believe is the only form of intimate partner violence or violence between partners.
Right. It's very much like child abuse in that sense. We believe and we behave as if the only form of violence is physical. The person is punching, the person is hitting, the person is biting, and we say that's abuse, and we are quick to identify it. But there are other forms of violence. The other forms of partner violence are just as destructive. Just in fact, some of them are even more so. One of those I want to speak about, again, as it relates to children, is the idea of verbal or psychological abuse, where the partner basically destroys that person's self image, self esteem, sense of identity, sense of being worthy, their self esteem, like I said. So they reduce them to a sense of nothingness. And I mean, just imagine when you lose self, where else is there to go? What else is there to lose? And just imagine how seriously destructive that could be, Miss Manville. So this is another one we need to guard against seriously.
So, when we talk about that type of intimate partner violence, could you give us a few examples as to what sort of situations, or what sort of things that might be said to a partner that would diminish them? Because sometimes we speak about it broadly and we don't have the concrete ideas of what that looks like. So, then people are not able to identify it.
Okay, let me give you an example that I know commonly. That's a very good question, Miss Manville, because very often we engage in those things without even thinking deeply or considering the implications. So you might say, you're really ugly. You're really ugly. That really fits you bad. You don't look good in that. Go and take that out. Go and take that out. That doesn't fit you well. That's not for you. You know, even little comments like that and how it is made. Or, boy, look at you. You have no skin on your body. Nobody would want you. You think anybody else would want you? I'm the only person who would take you on. If I leave you there right now, nobody else will want you because women like men we've meat on them, or men like women we've meat on them. You know, attacking the things that the person holds dear. You know, for example, there are some people who are insecure about their skin, and people would attack their skin. You can't even wear a swimsuit. You cannot go to the beach. Boy, if people see your skin, I can imagine what they would say. You know, those kinds of things. You cannot do anything well. You're a failure. You're so clumsy. The name calling, those kinds of things. You're not worth anything. Nobody wants you. These are some of those kinds of examples of that psychological element. And you know, when an individual hears it often enough, it actually begins to they drive it home, and it actually begins to become embedded in the person's memory, the person's psyche, and they start to believe that it is true, and they assume the identity and their behavior as their own.
So we're really talking about a pattern of
Exactly.
speaking to a person in that negative way. And also when it comes to the physical aspect of it, I is it would you say that it follows also a pattern, or would you uh, consider it to be in intimate partner violence if you have just one incident or a couple of incidents over a long period of time?
I like that question as well, Miss Van Manville. The truth is, intimate partner violence can take both forms. And it can also look like a pattern, or it may not look like a pattern. So it may become very unpredictable. Um, but before I go there, I want to make it clear that intimate partner violence can be a one time incident, it can be one episode, right? That is not insignificant. It happened one time, and that's one time too many, right? So for those people who say, "Oh, but that's the first time the man just give you a slap," no, that is intimate partner violence. And if you are strong enough to take a stand and take corrective action, move away, distance yourself from that, it does not change the fact that you have an experience of intimate partner violence. But we also have the situations where it's actually repeated over a long period of time. And that is also very destructive in terms of the consequences, not just for the individual involved, but for the children sometimes who are involved, for the families, and for the nation at large, right? So, and the consequences are far reaching. Sometimes we would not even believe how these things can impact people, even on the level of their jobs. Because just imagine you got a beating the night before, or you were abused in that way within your home with your partner, with somebody that you're supposed to trust, you're supposed to feel comfortable. That person is supposed to be your refuge, your comforter, where you get that kind of soothing, and then you have to get up and go to work the next day. How do you feel? Where are you functioning at? You know, clearly you are not in a frame of mind to be able, in most instances, to walk into that workplace, even if you put a smile on your face and you do, the mental work to deal with the outer, the visual. On the inside, this experience is still there eating away at you, and it is going to have an impact on your performance at work. Again, let's say somebody at work triggers you, or they say something, you're already irritable, you're already tired, you didn't sleep well, you're not feeling good about yourself, your self-esteem is diminished. So of course you can see how little things, your resilience is compromised, so that little things you might have dealt with quite easily on a normal day suddenly become more difficult to cope with, to manage. And even at the level of production, your energy level is reduced.
Okay. So while we're still on the topic of the types of violence, there are some people who tend to believe that sexual violence cannot happen within a relationship. So I would like you to speak about that a bit as it relates to probably being a form of intimate partner violence.
Well, for the persons who think that is very naive, that's a simple fact. Um, in fact, partner violence can happen in the context of a sexual relationship. Because even if two persons are involved in a sexual relationship, but at a given time, on a given day, for whatever reason, the man or the woman, either partner, and I really want to stress this, Miss Menville, because very often when we think about intimate partner violence, we tend to believe that it is only women who experience this. And I just want to take this moment to clarify that both men and women are victims of intimate partner violence. We see the cases where the women beat up on the men, they reduce them to nothing, they do the side, and women are very good at that. While men are more prone to do the physical abusing, the physical violence, women are much more prone to the psychological aspect. And they have become, I don't want to say we have become masters. Our tongue, our mouth is our most um, dangerous weapon, and we use it very well because some say that's all we have, so we use it to our advantage, right? But it happens between, sorry, my microphone fell out for a bit. It happens between both parties. And I want to go back to the question that you asked. It absolutely can. Because if in the context of a sexual relationship, a partner decides, I do not want to have sex, or I do not want to have an interaction of a sexual nature at that time in that way, or I am not comfortable with a particular act in a particular position in a particular way, that person cannot and should not be forced. But sometimes what we see is that persons are forced to partake in certain types or manifestations of that activity that they are not comfortable with. And that borders on and can become very violent, Ms. Menville.
Indeed.
I don't know if I've made it clear. Do you have any questions to develop this further?
And in that sense, it also speaks about when we talk about sexual violence, there's also the issue of the control of reproduction. So, more or less, if you have no say as it relates to when you participate, whether you use contraceptive or not, then it also leads to the fact that somebody else is controlling your reproduction. So for women, now you also mentioned something about men and women being able to use our tongues quite well in terms of psychological violence. The one of the things is that I've noted when a man is on the receiving end of intimate partner violence, we tend to make light of it. We use it to, as a form of entertainment, more or less. And I just need people to understand that in as much as women should not be on the receiving end of that type of violence, neither should men. And we really should not take it lightly. You'd see people making recordings and laughing and basically using it as entertainment, whereas it should be taken just as seriously. And I think that may be one of the reasons, right? That men may not be so open. Women tend not to be open about being victims or experiencing intimate partner violence either. And would you like to speak a bit about why that is that they don't speak up?
Unfortunately, Miss Menville, there's still a lot of stigma, a lot of discrimination around this issue, particularly for men. I mean, you said it yourself. We see the recordings, we see the social media posts, we hear the taunting within their friends, within the communities, within the neighbors, all of the names that they are called. And I mean, we don't have to go into them, but we hear all of the names and the labels that are attached. And that in many ways actually restricts men from expressing their thoughts, expressing their feelings, expressing their needs, but most of all, accessing help, going forward for help. I've had lots of experiences, and I've heard lots of stories of men who go for help and are laughed away by police officers and other law enforcement officials. I'm happy to report that I think a lot of our officers have become more exposed, more empowered, um, and more sensitive to the needs of people, both male and female. Unfortunately, unfortunately, the reality is that we are still fighting this issue, and it's one that we need to continue to battle with until we eliminate it altogether. Because men are human beings, and I don't like to just make linkages without the scientific proof, the evidence, but it has been alleged that, for example, one of the reasons that we see so many cases of suicide in men is because they do not feel like they have the same level of support. Let's think about it. A woman who is challenged, socially or otherwise, she's having an issue, she's experiencing an issue, there's an immediate social support network where she can go and vent and receive support and receive advice and receive assistance and help. For men, while they do have a social support, and yes, they do, they go, they play the dominoes, they play football, and that is good too. But in terms of that emotional support and actually processing some of those experiences, getting the help, getting the support, getting the advice, talking through the actual feelings about these things, that is not always a welcomed or forthcoming service in terms of the support. So I want to say that yes, I think men are very much more limited in their capacity to work through and process the psychological abuse that they are sometimes. And it's also very cultural, and I don't want to miss that point. It's a very cultural thing. We expect our men to be tough. We expect them to stand up. We don't want to see them cry. We still have all of those very archaic ideas about how men are supposed to behave as opposed to women. So, that cleansing that comes from a good cry, for example, men often do not have that at their disposal. And that is the sad reality. And we have to start normalizing and making it okay for men to express their feelings, regardless of what that is, once it's in a non-violent manner.
Absolutely. And since we're on the topic of support, you spoke about support as it relates to probably familial support and support among friends. Are there any avenues for support for both men and women? How should I put it, nationally? Are there any? We hear about women's shelters and other NGO supported NGOs that provide support to people experiencing intimate partner violence. Is there anything available on island for men or women? And could you share with us what you are aware of? I think we've lost Miss Andrew for a little bit. So we were talking about support for people experiencing intimate partner violence. I hope that when she rejoins us, she will be able to give us some more information as it relates to that support that is key in getting out of the situation and staying out of the situation. So far, we have spoken quite a bit about the types of support. We have spoken quite a bit about the types of support that the types of violence, sorry, involved in intimate partner violence. We spoke about psychological violence, sexual violence, physical violence. And Miss Andrew is back, so I hope that she is ready now to speak a little bit about the avenues for support available to those experiencing intimate partner violence.
Okay, Miss Minville, I'm sorry about that.
No
I
problem.
got thrown off by another. Yeah, you know the issues, the challenges with the technology. While we have it, we still continue to deal with many challenges at times. So my sincere apologies. In terms of support, yes, we do have the women support shelters. Um, I want to say loud and clear there is support. It may not be structured or formal in the sense that persons want it, but there is support. For example, and it may not be labeled support for persons experiencing intimate partner violence, but there are groups, there is support available. Let me give you a few examples. For those of us listeners who are employed within the public service, I know that the public service has an excellent employee assistance program that offers to support to persons who need some kind of support in various areas of their life. Because as we said earlier, we recognize the interconnectedness. We recognize that things spill over into other areas of of our lives. They never remain separate. And so services like the EAP are very useful before even, and we know ourselves best, Miss Menville. Sometimes we see the red flags. We are aware something is happening. We feel the dissatisfaction. We feel the anxiety. We feel the stress. We feel the tension. We take note of it, but we ignore it. We push it down.
We don't
Um,
act on it.
we don't act on it exactly. And that is very dangerous. And I want to encourage everybody out there. We are human beings. No man is an island. It is okay to access help. It is okay to ask for help. If you don't know where to get it, it is okay to go in and ask for directions so that you can be guided and directed to the appropriate resources. But one of the major resources is the Employee Assistance Program, like I said, for those of us who are working within the public service. There are also resources like our religious groupings. I know there are men's groups. Many of the religious groupings have men's groups. Even within our informal groups like um the guys on the block, or even within groups like the football groups, right? Even within the football groups, there are resources. There can be somebody, you can start the dialogue. You can change the mindset that when somebody comes with an issue, or if you are aware that somebody is experiencing an issue, that you find resources, you find ways, you find suggestions that can help, and you offer it in a non-invasive, non-threatening manner. You know, when I grew up, I used to hear the saying, be each other's keeper. I don't know what has happened to that ideology, that mindset in recent years. But Miss Menville, I want to suggest that we really need to go back to that. But to go back to the more formal ones, again, you have things like your family doctor. Your family doctor. It's amazing. You can go to your family doctor, and I'm not saying he will fix it, but he might be able to give you some clues. Sometimes there's something physical impacting. Perhaps the reason for, you get to speak about it. Sometimes we don't want to explore or accept the fact that there are physical elements to the things we experience at home. you know is there a physical angle, something that can be done, whether it's with performance, whether if it's with your libido, whether if it's with your desires, your urges, whether it is with your diet, whether it is with your sleep pattern, whether it is because you're tired all the time and you need a multivitamin, or you need an exercise routine. All of those things are very healthy. I'm so speaking to your GP, your doctor, also speaking to your priest, your religious leaders. These are again resources that are available to us that we don't often use. But also we have places like we have free counseling services available at many of our community groups right now, right? I know that SSDF has the youth and family resiliency support workers in some of the communities, for example, Soufriere right now. These are people that can provide the support to our young persons, for example, that they can go into their workers, work alongside them, speak to them, and share what is impacting. So often when we share, we think that we still have to put on this facade. We have to make it look good. We have to speak only about certain things that are appropriate or acceptable. But if you don't speak about what's truly impacting you, how then? You have to let people in. You have to ask for what you want. You have to be able to allow yourself to access the help you need. So I encourage persons, of course, again, I want to be clear. I'm not saying go out there and speak to any and everybody. We have the school counselors in the schools. We have the district counselors in the education districts. All of these are valuable resources, right? Within the workplaces, we have the HR officers that are bound to direct, to help us, even if they don't have the resources themselves, to find it, to make some calls, to direct us to the resource closest to us. We have the crisis hotline, 211, for persons who are thinking, contemplating suicide, feeling hopeless. These resources are available to you. So they are quite a bit. And separate and apart from that, I want to encourage people to find their own coping capacity and their own strength even before it gets there. I want us not to underestimate the benefit of things like exercise, building your social support group, building your own life, finding things that enrich and strengthen your life, that remind you of who you are as a person, things that feed your soul, things that strengthen you and reinforce your self-concept, reinforce your values, help you to have some distinct lines about what you accept, what you stand for, what you want in your life, what are the deal breakers. Because once you understand these things and you have that level of self-awareness, it is going to become a great protective factor for you as well. Miss
Okay.
Manfield?
So there are two things I want to touch on based on what you just said. In terms of support, we know that it is a process for somebody who has been experiencing intimate partner violence to break away completely.
Right.
For those who may give up on them because, the saying is that you try to help them and then they go right back and then they get vexed with you. You know that is one of the things that comes up quite often when it comes to intimate partner violence. So I would like you to speak to that. What can you say to those people who are trying to provide support?
Okay. So you basically already spoke to some of them, Miss Menville. The point is, it is a process, and I really like this word for a lot of reasons. Again, I think we underestimate the value of this word process. But process helps us understand that it is not magical. It is not an outcome that you get in a blink of an eye. You cannot wave a magic wand, right? There are processes, because first it's about understanding that despite the issues, there are lots of attachments to that abuser. Very often, part of what gives an abuser the power to abuse is a deep level of attachment. And we may think of it as an unhealthy attachment, but the point is, it is an attachment. And it is one that is difficult to break because it's usually not one that was created overnight. Right? In a lot of instances, for example, we see one of the more common areas is that of financial dependence. And that's a big one. He's the one paying my rent. He's the one putting food on my table. He's the one giving me money to send my kids to school in the morning. How do I leave him? When I leave him, who's going to take care of my children? And that's real, Miss Menville. That's real.
Absolutely.
You understand? That's real. Because I cannot say to you, or you cannot say to me, Miss Andrew, leave that man, walk away. He's not good for you. You're not tired of taking blows, girl? Leave that man, nice girl, like you leave that man and go. So many men out there. But all of that is, in a sense, very superficial, very far off. The reality on the ground is that in a few hours, if I tell him to leave at 9 o'clock, by 12 o'clock, I need to figure out, or by 11, possibly even 10, I need to figure out what I'm preparing for lunch for my kids that are going to come home from school to get something warm to put in their stomachs at the midday break for school. And how do I deal with that very reality, right? Now, let us think about it. In order for persons to cope with those issues, they have to put systems and structures in place. They have to put systems and structures. We have to reduce that level of dependence. We have to empower that person. We have to provide real viable options. How can I earn? Where can that other dollar come from? Can I get a job? How long will it take me to get a job? Do I have marketable skills? Am I employable? Do I need to go and take a course in order to get myself in a place where I am now employable? All of these things, if you think about it and you work through it with me, these are things, or maybe I need a new apartment, but I can only afford $500 a month. I have to first locate an apartment for that price. I have to file a restraining order. I have to go through the waiting period at the courts, depending on what the backlog of cases are. You understand? I have to, and any and all of these things in those situations are things that take a bit of time. So you have to be able to work through a process. But even outside of the physical challenges that would create delays, let's talk about the emotional attachment. We've spoken about the financial dependence, what the person is supplying, but very often there is an emotional attachment which makes it very difficult for persons to walk away from their abusers. It almost becomes a sense of it is that person who validates them. Sometimes they tell you that is a person who loves them. He loves them because that's why he hits them or she hits them. It's because she loves them. So how do you break away from that? Before I give the answer to that, I'm interested to hear what your callers think. Are there any callers on the line? It seems like I'm the only one speaking.
Not at the moment,
Not at the
unfortunately.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Soufriere FM used to have very active callers, right? So there's that emotional bond here that makes it very difficult. Most times, these people, they are very isolated. Part of the abuse creates a system of isolation that makes it, that person becomes, I'm trying to break it down as much as I can. It's like that person becomes the center of the perpetrator becomes the center of the victim's world. You understand? And it just becomes extremely, extremely difficult. They do not feel capable of walking away from that bond that they've shared because it is comfortable, it is familiar, it's what they've always known. Let me give you an example. We see the same kind of thing sometimes happening between persons who have gone to jail and are in jail for life sentences or a long time. When they get out of jail, it is very difficult for them to be reintegrated and to fit back into society. And it is the same kind of ideal. That situation, in as much as it is uncomfortable, in as much as it's painful, in as much as it is destructive and toxic, it is also familiar. They can count on it. They know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen. And in some ways, they have their own coping mechanisms for dealing with it. And they've learned to manage it in their minds to some extent. So anything else becomes very difficult to deal with. I don't know if you want to share something on that, Miss Menville.
Not on that in particular, but I want to speak a little bit. I would like you to speak a little bit about something that you mentioned, some of those factors throughout your discussion here, as it relates to the protective factors, or what are the things. Is intimate partner violence preventable? What are the warning signs that would allow somebody to be on the alert so that they probably don't get too deeply involved in a situation of intimate partner violence? What are the warning signs? How do you know you're in a healthy relationship?
That's a good question. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, Miss Menville. What do you think?
You'd like to have my thoughts?
Yes.
Well,
How do you know that you're in a
you're the expert guest, Miss
yeah,
Andrew.
I may well be according to you, but you've had a lifetime of experiences as well. And today I'm not hearing Erlan. I know Erlan says he's not
Ellen
feeling
is
well.
not feeling well today. Ellen is just
Yeah,
hanging on with me there this morning. Just hanging in there with me a little,
just hanging by a thread. I don't
just by
believe
a
that. I
thread.
know Erlan to be stronger than that. But
Oh,
yes, Miss Menville, I mean, that's an interesting question. And really and truly, I mean, uh, this question has become a lot more complex, and I'll tell you why. The world is a very dynamic place. I don't know if you've noticed. A lot of the parameters are bending and shifting almost on a daily basis. Have you observed that? So, some of the things we thought were taboo, some of the things we thought were unthinkable, some of the things we thought were, you know, totally unacceptable on, are now becoming more and more tolerated and accepted. Now, once people begin to tolerate and accept, then that also has implications for what we call, for concepts like intimate partner violence. Because, for example, let me pose a question to you. Let me throw this at you.
okay.
I have situations where, for example, during that intimate act, some persons desire. I mean, I'm sure you've heard the song. I'm not sure, and maybe Erlan knows it because he has dreadlocks, where it is said that the girls like the rastas to choke them with their dreadlocks. Erlan, you aware of that
I've
song?
never heard that one.
What is Erlan saying?
Never heard that one.
You never heard that one, but have you heard that concept? Have you heard that talk of that
I've
they
heard the
like?
talk of the choking, but
Right.
I tend to think that comes from viewing a lot of pornography.
Well, it doesn't matter where it comes from. My question to you, Miss Menville, is that if in a physical act with my partner, I like to be choked, it actually helps me to feel, to get where I want to go, to achieve that desired height. Do you call that intimate partner violence?
I I would not consider it to be intimate partner violence unless both parties have not agreed to it. If both parties have agreed to it and they're okay
Exactly.
with it, then it would not be
Exactly.
considered intimate partner violence.
Exactly.
And if the
Perfect.
woman likes to be choked and the man is not interested, she should not coerce him into doing it either.
Exactly. But one of the things that's actually happening now, and people are having open conversation, and we have to keep a clear head about this, is that I remember having a conversation with my son recently, and he said, "Mommy, well, the world is dynamic." And I didn't have a comeback for him because he's absolutely right. The world, and that's the truth. we really are starting to have very fluid and constantly evolving definitions of things. Because, Miss Menzies, let's say you were to walk into a place unexpectedly and you see a young lady choking a young man in an act of intimacy, or vice versa, then you, from your frame of reference, may immediately jump into action, panic, and assume or perceive a particular thing, and then take a particular course of action based on your perception. Whereas to the two people involved in that act, there's absolutely nothing inappropriate, no extreme violence. It is consensual. They've agreed. They have their I forget what it's called, but they actually have um their signs to indicate when it's too much, when it's time to stop, those kinds of flags to indicate, to communicate with each other, okay, this is getting a little too extreme. I am no longer comfortable. You need to stop now. You need to relax now. We need to back this down and those kinds of things. So I want to say to you, in terms of describing partner violence, intimate partner violence, it is very difficult for me to sit here and give you a formula, because the truth is there's no magic formula. What I want to say to you is that if individuals need to first and foremost be self-aware, very much self-aware, and very much in sync with and aware of what who they are as people, what their preferences are, what they do not like, what they are not willing to explore, what their deal breakers are. Because sometimes you think you like something, but you still want to explore other things and you open to it to a certain extent. When it becomes extreme, or when it becomes intolerable, that means that's your deal breaker. You're not willing to tolerate it or explore that. So I think the key is to communicate well. I think the key to a good relationship is good communication. Can you express your needs? Can your partner, I think communication, can you speak openly and clearly about the things that matter to you? Do you feel like your viewpoints are respected and your partner respects you as a person? Do you feel that your partner honors your choices? So he or she may not agree, but they understand and respect it enough to honor your choices. You were saying something? I keep hearing some feedback. I am not sure.
I'm not sure why you're hearing that feedback, but I appreciate the explanation that you gave in terms of warning signs. I had not thought about it that in that way at all. So I really appreciate that. And the other thing I would like
But
to
I want to
say,
just, without cutting you short, Miss Menville, I want specifically for our young listeners, I want to highlight a few things. Again, experience is a great teacher. I want to say to young people out there, don't go into a habit, especially when you start dating. You do not like to go scuba diving. You're afraid of being underwater. You might try it once, but don't make a habit of doing it just to please your partner. Communicate with your partner that you don't like certain things, that you are not comfortable with it. And you can only take some baby steps to get to that level of comfort. And if you cannot get to that level of comfort, communicate that too. If your partner is, for example, you feel a sense of control. When you are with your partner, you cannot pick up your phone, even if it's your mother calling or your school calling. You know, these control issues, these are red flags you need to pay attention to. The tone of voice when the person is angry, how does a person deal with anger? Or how does a person deal with disappointment? Has there been a change of plans? Okay, so you had plans to go out on Friday night, but something more important came up. Your mom is not well, or your mom has asked you to do something, and you have to make a change at that last minute. How does the person respond to that? These are all warning signs. I just encourage persons to observe their partner. Don't just stay in your comfort zone and have those tough discussions. Speak about things. How do you feel about children? How do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? Ask the questions about the things that you want to know and explore the areas that you are interested to find out about. Thank you, Miss Menville. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, I
Go
think
ahead.
your explanation took care of everything. Um,
Oh,
and
no, no, go ahead.
no, it was very good advice, and I think you said young people, but it goes for all of us because you spoke about experience, and there are some older persons who don't have that much life experience. So I think it would be useful and beneficial to all those interested in having a partner in their lives. So, in as much as you said you could not list warning signs, you listed quite a few and very good ones too. But
Yes. Yeah, but
I
and just
appreciate the different perspective that you gave. Now, in terms of that example that you used as an onlooker, if you were to think about that situation of the choking, I would still think it would be best to err on the side of caution and at least to take the step. And if that really is something that is has been agreed upon between both parties, then you can step back because violence should never be just accepted. If we start to just think about things as, oh, maybe that's the people's thing, and you don't get involved, then things can get very dangerous very quickly.
but you agree that this is not something that somebody would walk into quite likely. It's a most
You
unlikely
just never know.
scenario.
Have you seen those
Mm.
video clips going around
Yeah, I haven't seen
happening
them.
in public spaces?
I've heard of some of them, and
Oh,
yes, people are really pushing the buck. The truth is, people are really pushing the buck on a lot of things. A lot of things are being explored, and again, the key is that it's consensual. So, for example, if I were to walk in on a situation like that, you know, um, I would assume that it would cause some kind of interruption. The mere fact that I've walked in and that there would be an interruption, so there'd be a break, there'd be some, how do you say, pause to the activity, the flow of activity.
hopefully.
And if it is, somebody indicates to me that there is danger or discomfort, certainly I would act. But if it is, and sometimes it's about reading those signs that people, are actually angry with you, irritated that you would have disrupted their flow. So, I mean, I don't know. It's such a fine balancing act. And that applies almost to everyday life. But that's why, Miss Menville, I really want to encourage the concept of dating. In our culture, for women especially, they have been discouraged because of the stereotypes, the labels, the judgments. Si men pase a, an motoka blanc point, si men sa, mi an motoka rouge avin point, mi sa se troisième motoka mwen hawe ki an Marseille. But people have to be able to explore, and I think dating is what allows that. So I think there's great benefit in dating, in finding out about yourself, about other people, what works, what doesn't work, what you like, what you don't like, because very often we meet somebody and it seems well, because everything is in a very controlled setting. But it is only as you speak, as you explore, as you engage that person, that you begin to find out. I'll give you an example. Um, I find one of the things that are happening now is that males are asking females to drop them home, and perhaps that's because a lot of females are now mobile, but
Mhm.
drop them home and then make the long drive home after a night out on their own. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm I had never even thought about it, but men are supposed to be, in our maybe in our generation, men are seen as protectors. So you
Exactly.
would expect a man to make sure that the lady gets home safely. So I don't know whether it's a case of the technology being used. So then they would say to you that at least when she gets home, she can call me or text me and let me know that she's safe. So I would
Right.
say things are fluid, and that may be one of the issues contributing to that.
Right. But I raise that because even as older, as parents and grandparents, these are some of the things we have to be aware of. Because what is happening too is that a lot of young women are now getting home on their own, which leaves a window for these predators, for that kind of attack. Um, it just makes you wonder because that level of protectiveness, that protective factor is also now being compromised and being changed. The dynamics have changed. So I don't know, but I want to just encourage the concept of dating for persons to actually delve, find out about the person you're interested in, find out about your partner, pay attention. Something doesn't add up. And that's something, oh, I really need to speak on that. We like to stay in our comfort zones and speak. I know a lot of people who say, why you being nosy? Why you nagging? Why you asking these questions? You're so fast. And in a lot of instances, it's a way to keep people in their corner, keep them in the safe area so they don't ask questions. And many young and older women feel the need to toe these fine lines, not ask certain questions because they are uncomfortable, because they are difficult. But I want to say today, Miss Menville, on your show, for whoever is listening out there, take my foolish advice, ask the questions. If it is on your mind, if it is creating discomfort, if it is creating unease, if it is weighing on you, then it is worth asking. And no question is too big or too small. Ask your question. And if the person honors you, if they respect you, I believe they will take the time to communicate well and put you at ease and give you the truthful answers so that you can then make an informed decision for yourself.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
Yes.
That was very well said. And on that note, Miss Andrew, I think we have come to the end of our program. I really appreciate your contribution today, and I'm sure that our listeners gained a lot of information, and I hope that we can all put it into good use. Experienced as inexperienced men and women, that we can think, sometimes we go into relationships, we live our lives generally as though we are on autopilot, and we don't bring these issues to the forefront of our
Absolutely.
so that we can actually think about them while we are in those situations that we find ourselves in. So I think you made a very valid contribution today. It's always a pleasure having you, and I
It's
look
always a
forward
pleasure
to
being here.
having you with us again.
Thank you, Miss Menville. Thank you for having me. It's always, always a pleasure. It's always just a sharing process. I learn as much as I give. I want to say to Erlen, I hope you feel better. You do what you have to do. And thank you, Miss Menville. Travel safely. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Oh, and one more thing. I hope the listeners can at least call in next time, share with us, share your views, share your points. We'd love to hear from you. That's
We
what makes a discussion even richer. And so we can all learn from each other. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you to our listeners. Thank you again to Earl and Romanus and our special guest, Miss Andrew. Please join us next week at the same time for another show.
Thank you.